HERS ratings are often used to prove compliance to energy codes. Energy code compliance reports are available through the same approved software used for generating HERS ratings. There are some important considerations to keep in mind, however. There are several alternatives a project may use to prove compliance with energy codes. But before we go there, the first question to be answered is, must the project comply with the International Energy Conservation Code? The I codes, as they're called, are model codes. This means the ICC, the International Code Council, develops models of codes that states and local jurisdictions can choose to use or to modify or just ignore and write their own codes. There are some areas that don't have energy codes and some that don't have building codes at all. If you're hired to evaluate code compliance, find out what the codes are for the building location. The I codes are models. The law is the locally adopted code. Most jurisdictions at least start with the I codes and amend the parts that they want to change to create local building codes. So let's take a look at the IECC. The alternatives that may be used are referred to as paths. The prescriptive path has 3 alternatives, and the performance path has historically had 1 alternative. In the 2015 IECC, a second performance path alternative was added, the Energy Rating Index. The prescriptive path is a path that has all the requirements laid out in the codes. All energy items must meet or exceed the values in the codes to meet compliance. The code actually has the word prescriptive written in it to designate the items that are specifically for this path. A builder following the prescriptive path has to meet or exceed all the requirements, including specific R values for the specific areas, specific U factors for doors, windows, and specific SHGCs for windows, etc. However, they do have an option of proving that a specific building assembly has a U factor that's equal to or less than the one shown in the codes for the complete assembly as an alternative to meeting a specific R value. They also have the option of proving that a total building thermal envelope has a total UA less than or equal to the total UA had all the specific R values been followed. That one requires a much more complex calculation process. The simulated performance alternative allows for performance-based compliance that proves that the proposed design energy costs will be equal to or less than the standard reference design energy costs. That path includes the thermal envelope, but also takes into account the heating, cooling, mechanical ventilation, and water heating systems efficiencies. The Energy Rating Index, or ERI path, is sometimes referred to as the true performance path because it takes into account the whole house and everything in it, including lights, appliances, and solar, which the other paths don't include. When the path is selected, the documentation must be generated that proves compliance with the energy code. The prescriptive path R value and U factor paths are generally proven using ResCheck because it's a simple, quick, and free tool for the builder to use where they can input the data and generate the report. The total UA and simulated performance alternatives are quite a bit more complex, and the ERI path must be verified by an approved third party. These 3 paths can all be verified using approved HERS rating software. A projected HERS rating and resulting reports can be used to show compliance to obtain a building permit. The field inspections and verification is then required as the unit's being built, and a confirmed HERS rating and resulting reports are used to prove compliance of the as-built structure for the certificate of occupancy. Reports to prove compliance or to determine why the property is not in compliance will vary by software tool used. These are cost and UA compliance reports from REMRate. You can see that the cost target is $799, but the projected cost is $806. So the simulated performance path for the 2018 IECC, which we're looking at here, is not being met. It also shows, though, that the duct leakage is not met and that the mandatory requirements checkbox has not been checked. We'll talk about that a little more later on. The total UA report shows that the target for the total UA is 439.2, while the design is coming in at 570.6. So the total UA path is also not being met. The ERI report shows that the index target for the home's climate zone is 62, but the actual ERI is 64, so that path fails as well. We can check the mandatory requirements box on this report and see that we have other failed items also. The reports all include areas for organization information and signatures and help to determine why the project is not meeting the chosen path compliance, as well as providing a report to give to the code official. The code has minimum mandatory requirements for insulation, air leakage, lighting, and building systems that all residential units must meet. As you read through the code, you'll see the word mandatory labeling those items. The HERS index is a point-in-time measured efficiency rating of a structure as it is at that point in time. It's not a pass-fail. It is just what it is. A HERS rating can be performed on an uninsulated shack. Just because a structure has a HERS rating does not mean that it passes code. Code verification, however, is pass or fail. All failures must be corrected and re-verified, and there are items in the code that have absolutely no impact on the HERS or the Energy Rating Index, but they still must be verified when performing Energy Code compliance verifications. I promised to get back to that mandatory items checkbox. The HERS rating software has a checkbox that the rater must check if a code compliance report is needed. But checking that box means the HERS rater is certifying that he or she has verified all the Energy Code compliance items, not just those required to perform a HERS rating. The Energy Code has 6 chapters, but energy professionals are trained on the items in Chapter 4, Residential Energy Efficiency. They don't get a lot of exposure or have a lot of knowledge of the other chapters. Clicking that box without understanding these other requirements creates a lot of liability for a HERS rater. That being said, there's also a lot of overlap when it comes to the information gathered, the items verified, and the tests performed between code and HERS ratings. It's the duty of the code verifier to check the compliance documentation to make sure that all requirements are being met. The HERS rater does review almost all the required items when performing a projected rating from the plans. The items that are not normally reviewed include manual JS&D designs, which is a mandatory item. However, many HERS raters are also certified to perform verification for above-code programs such as Energy Star or LEED for Homes, which do require a review of manual JS&D, so that training is available to HERS raters. Code also requires that specific items be present in the notes on the plans, and while HERS raters do read the notes to gather energy information, they aren't used to also looking for these specific items. And code requires that the plans include a depiction of exactly where the building thermal envelope is located. This is one area that HERS raters would excel at verifying and most likely would be tasked by the builder to help develop. They just aren't used to verifying that it's present in the plans. The code also requires on-site inspections, and HERS raters do perform on-site inspections. A HERS rating normally includes a pre-drywall and final inspection at a minimum. But depending on the project and goals, there may also be a pre-slab and rough-in inspection. Many of the code items required are again reviewed as part of a HERS rating. But some items, like plumbing, controls, and circulation systems, and thermostats, dampers, and piping insulation, may not be looked at quite in the same light. While these items are part of a HERS rating, when verified as part of a code inspection, they must be verified to meet plans and standards, and piping insulation includes not just the hot water piping, but insulation for mechanical equipment line sets as well. This is true of a lot of the code required items. It goes back to the point that with a HERS rating, the rater is documenting what has actually been included, and the code verifier is requiring that the included items meet all the plans and specifications, and that everything required has been included to the levels that must be met. There are many items that code calls out to be included, and many of them are mandatory items. So performing code verification does not take a lot of extra time for a HERS rater since they're already verifying the as-is state of these items. It just takes some extra education and looking at these items from a different point of view. A pass-fail consideration instead of a data-gathering paradigm. HERS raters are familiar with and often need to perform re-inspections. That part of the code, as well as the approval and stop work order parts, need to be worked out with the code official approving the HERS rater as a code verifier. These are all authority and responsibility boundaries that need to be well understood by the HERS rater. Chapter 5 in the code covers how changes to existing buildings are affected by the codes. This is a chapter that HERS raters performing code inspections will need to study. Chapter 6 provides referenced standards. The bottom line is that if you plan to perform code inspections and provide reports showing energy code compliance, you need to sit down with the code officials to whom you will be providing these reports and make sure that you both understand what you will and will not be responsible and liable for. They may want you to only handle the on-site testing and verification, and they have someone in-house that performs all the mandatory item plan reviews. They may perform some of the site verification items that are not normally part of a HERS rating and only want you to do what you would do anyway. Or they may expect that if you're performing the energy code inspection, that you're performing all of it. Make sure you have a very good understanding of the code official's expectations and put it all in writing so you both have something to refer to. Don't just check that box so that you can print your reports and assume that everything is good. The energy codes cover much more than what's involved in our basic HERS rating. HERS raters are a natural fit for performing energy code compliance inspections, but need to be very cognizant of exactly what's required and expected of them when performing that type of work and providing energy code compliance reports.